All right, everybody, my computer says it is time to go live. So I'm just going to test everything really quick because I am a one-man recording studio, live studio audience. So let me just make sure that everything is working. So there's like a 30-second delay. Oh, and it's ready. So this tells me that I'm on and we are ready to go, and it sounds like you can hear me. So this is perfect. So before we all jumped in, I was asking a couple of questions in the chat. Are you all done with your Christmas shopping, or are you a last minute person? And so if you want to let me know what's happening in your world, you can drop that in the chat. Also, I see that there's a lot of cookie bakers out there. So if you don't mind, drop your favorite type of cookie down there in the chat. Mine is Snickerdoodle. That is my favorite cookie. It's very simple, and I love the sugar and cinnamon. I learned how to make those in home economics class. So those are my favorite cookies. So let me know what those cookies are. And so once you do that, say hello to each other, and then we will get started. So let me just explain the format. And I'm going to switch my camera view really quick. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Yvonne, and this is the Jelly Roll Club. And so we are going to be making Christmas ornaments. And of course, the Christmas ornaments look like little cookies. So they look like little gingerbread cookies. And I have put a list together that's on the website that tells you what you're going to need for each ornament. Now, if you haven't downloaded that, don't panic, because I want you to go ahead and think about this project before you get started, because it can be made two ways. We can make this project with felt as a felted project, or we can make them as a quilted project, and I will be showing you how to do both methods. So I'm going to get online every night for about 15 or 20 minutes. I'm going to show you the progress that I'm making on my gingerbread cookie ornaments, and then I'm going to share one quick tip or technique with you every day, and I'm going to show you something a little bit different every night. If you are new to the Jelly Roll Club, don't forget to give us a like and hit that thumbs up. That helps us to get found by other people who have common interests. So the Jelly Roll Club is basically your club. You tell me the kinds of things that you want to do, and then I create projects and we work on those together. And that's why they're all kind of quilt-along type projects. So this one was a viewer suggestion. They wanted to do felted ornaments, and so I took it upon myself to create this project. And so you're going to see that everything that we do here is usually a suggestion that comes from an audience member. So if you have suggestions about what we should be doing or what we could be working on, you let me know. All right, so without any further ado, let me just talk about basic hand stitches. This project can be made completely by hand, so you only really need needle and thread and a few supplies, or you can do it on your sewing machine, and I'm going to show you both methods. If you are new to embroidery, there are a few stitches that I'm going to be talking about, and if you notice, I put a little handout. Do you see that handout right over there? So I'm going to start at the top, and the top one is called a blanket stitch, and that is used in hand applique, and it's used a lot in wool applique. So that's the one that you see at the top. So when I talk about a blanket stitch, that's what I'm talking about. The next one that you're going to see is this one down here, and it's called a running stitch. And so that's just a basic stitch where you rock the needle up and down, and you see those little tiny stitches that go across. The next one over there in the middle is called a satin stitch, and that's what you typically see like in hand embroidered objects. So if you've seen any of those beautiful hand embroidered flowers, maybe some otomi embroidery from Mexico, they use the satin stitch for all of those. The next and the last stitch that we're going to be talking about in this series is called the lazy daisy stitch, and that's simply a stitch that when you loop it, you have anchor points in the embroidery. So it's a loose piece of thread that you anchor with stitching, and that's called a lazy daisy stitch. So if you're not familiar with those, I will be putting this handout on my Facebook page, and I will also put it on the website when we're done so that you can have access to it. And I'm going to put it in the community tab. So if you want this handout that has the pictures of the basic stitches and you're new to hand sewing, I will put that in the description for you and also in the comment section. So I'll put it lots of places for you, okay? All right. All right, friends, so let me move this image. So let me get rid of this right there. And so now that that's gone, I can show you what I've got going on. So for the gingerbread project, the first one today is marked December 4th. It's a single pattern that has all of these projects on here. So we have one for every day, and we're going to start with the swirly twirly cookie today. So for the swirly twirly cookie, and you're going to notice these cookies are big cookies. They're nice, generous, 5-inch squares, what you start with, and you're going to end up with a nice, great big cookie. And how I did mine, if you notice there's two, is I simply cut this out and I pinned it on top of my felt piece. You can either staple it or pin it. I just pinned mine, and then I cut around my felt. And so I got one of those. For my cookie, I actually needed two because I'm going to make this double-sided. So I'm going to make 2 cookies. The next thing that I needed for this cookie is a circle that was red, which was slightly smaller. And so the next piece that I needed, and let me just measure, I think this is 3.5 inches. No, this one's, yeah, it's like a little bit bigger than 3.5. But if you trace this piece right here, this is what you end up with. The next thing that you need is you need some white. And this is just a piece of paper, and it is the same size as the red that you need for the swirly twirly cookie, okay? And like I said, I'm going to be doing this every day, and there's multiple ways of doing this. You can do this by hand, or you can do this by machine. You can do these with felt like I'm going to be doing, but you could also do these, and I'm going to show you how, with fabric. So if you want to do these with just quilting cotton, I'm going to show you how to do the same designs in a different medium. And so, all right, friends, let's get started. So let's talk about felt, right? Because not all felt is created equal. If you go to a traditional big box store, you're going to see these little crafting squares, right? And they call that crafting felt, but it's very thin. Can you see my hand through it? And when I hold it up to the light, you can really see through that. I don't recommend this kind of felt for this project because as you can see, it's very thin. This is great for kids' crafts or other things. But if you want to make these ornaments and you want them to last a long time, then you're going to want to use, instead of this acrylic felt, you're going to want to use wool felt or a wool blend. One of my favorite places to buy felt is online, and they have these great bundles. I get these from an Etsy seller called Sweet Emma Jean, and she puts together these bundles of felt. This is 100% wool felt. It's nice and thick, and when you hold it up to the light, you can't see through it. And this is her fall collection, and I just thought this was just absolutely gorgeous. So I'm going to be doing a penny rug with this, so I'm saving this particular package. But if you can't get a hold of wool felt, then I suggest that you go to most fabric stores. They have a section that has what is called premium crafting felt, and that is usually sold in a ginormous, and I mean ginormous, look at this one, 72-inch with bolts. So if you can find some of this, it's usually in a bolt, and it is much, much, much thicker. Now you have to look at the content of this. If this is acrylic, you're not going to be able to press this with an iron because it has a low melting point, so it'll melt on you. So if you're going to be using this kind of felt, then you have to stick with machine sewing or hand sewing, and you won't be able to use fusibles on this, okay? Hi, everybody. I see Anita's here. Hi, Anita. I see lots of my friends. What is a penny rug? A penny rug is a rug that is made with felt, and I'm going to be doing some penny rugs next year. but it is made with multiple layers of felt, and then you cut out all the designs and you put them on top. But next year I will be happy to share with you guys some patterns for some penny rugs that I'm working on. So if you're interested in making a penny rug, don't you worry, we are going to be doing that next year. And just so you can see, I use washi tape that has little cats on it, because I'm a cat lady, to hold things down. Okay, so when I cut these out, right, I just traced them on my felt with, I made a little template out of cardboard. And then I just laid my felt, and you can trace around it and then cut it out. You have to be kind of careful and use a very sharp scissor and a smooth line to get a nice straight cut. Once you do that, then you'll be ready for the next step. So once you cut these two, and you'll have to excuse me because I've had a terrible, terrible cough, and so I've been very sick. The next piece that you're going to need is that little swirly twirly piece that goes in the center. And you can do that in a variety of ways. I cut this one out of fabric, and I could put the swirly twirly piece in the center and make it out of quilting cotton, just like that, and fuse it down into place and stitch around it. Or I could cut it out of felt like I did this one, and I could blanket stitch all the way around. And both of those are going to require different techniques. You could also, if you wanted to, make that swirly twirly out of a little bit of yarn, and you could just lay it down there, pin it, and stitch on over it with a satin stitch. But for today, I'm going to show you how to do a basic basting of felt, and then how to make a little swirly. But this one here is fusible web, and I'm going to be using this on my fabric because I cannot use heat on my acrylic, because this is an acrylic felt, because it will melt my acrylic felt, and I don't want that mess on my iron. So let me show you how to make the swirly twirly tonight, and we'll get started. So the first thing that you're going to do, if you have a shape like this that you're trying to make, is you're going to take a little bit of paper, and I just have this paper right here, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to trace my shape. I like using a light box, or you can just use a Sharpie. A Sharpie works great. And you're just going to trace inside there a nice fresh Sharpie, because it shows all the way through to the back. So I love using a nice fresh Sharpie for these things. You just turn it, it makes it easier to get a nice straight line. Sometimes people, when they draw, they're afraid to move their paper. I move my paper all the time because it's easier to move the paper than to bend your wrist, right? And so don't be afraid to move your paper all the way around and get that image traced out. If you have one of those fancy cutting machines like a Brother Scan and Cut, you can always trace, then the image shows up on the back and you can scan it with your Brother Scan and Cut. In the near future, if I get more adventurous, I may buy one of those fancy machines. Liquid stitch would work if you want to, or even a glue pen would also work if you wanted to. Okay, so I've traced the little swirly durly, the little frosting on my cookie, and now you can see it on the back. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just cut this piece, kind of rough cut it like this, and this is why you get two of them. And I'm going to end up with one piece that looks like that. Then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to lay it on a piece of acrylic felt. This is the nice premium acrylic felt. And I'm going to lay this on top. And I could either pin it, which I'm just going to run a big fat pin through there. And I'm going to use my extra sharp applique scissors to cut around here. So I'm just going to kind of rough cut for now. And don't worry if it looks rough, it's really rough cutting. I just want to separate it from the rest. Now that I have that rough cut, I'm going to take, and if you have little tiny applique pins like I do here, let me reach over here. These little teeny tiny pins that are only about an inch long are great for felt projects. So if you have those are even better than great big pins. You can also use a stapler. So if you have a stapler, guess what? It works great for this. You could literally staple your patterns straight onto the craft felt and they come right out. So I'm going to put these pins in the areas that I'm going to cut away, right? So I've got about 3 pins, and now I'm ready to give it a swirl. When you cut felt, cut smooth and then stop and move your scissor. You'll get a smoother edge. So instead of getting those jaggedy edges, just have a smooth, continuous motion with your hands. It enables you to have a nice, super smooth cut on your felt instead of a jaggedy edge. And that takes practice. The first couple of times that you do this, it's going to look like a butcher job, but just practice. Practice makes perfect. Take your time. Don't worry if it doesn't look perfect the first time you try it. All right. Does anybody have any questions? All right, so I'm going to come around this corner and then I'm going to wrap my way back around the other direction. So I'm going to travel back to where I came. And I'm going to cut away all this excess. I don't need that. It's just in my way. So I'm going to move it out of there. And now I'm going to pull out my little scissor. Now that I've got the big rough cut and I have this swirl, I'm going to use my smaller scissors and I'm going to come in here and I'm going to cut along this curve. To download the pattern for this particular project, you can go to the community tab on YouTube. So YouTube has these little tabs that go across the top. And if you click on the tab that says community, there's a link for the pattern on there. You can also go to my website, which is www.jellyrollclub.com, and you can download it there. Or you can grab it from the Facebook page. So all of those methods are correct ways to find the pattern. Does that make sense? Am I making sense? Sometimes talking and sewing at the same time causes problems, but we're okay. All right, so now that I have that, I'm going to pull this out and I'm going to finish cutting it without the little paper. So I'm done. I have this little swirly twirly. I don't need this anymore. I'll pull it out of the way. And I'm going to unpin it. And so I have this little curly cue. I actually have 2, right? So it's like a little double spiral. And I'm going to finish cutting this in here with my scissor because I want to get that nice inside curve to be nice and smooth. So I want to go ahead and remove that paper and give myself a nice smooth curve, and there it goes. And so now I have a tight little spiral that I'm ready to put on my red piece. And I'm going to check. Do you see how I have a few jagged edges where I stopped? I'm going to do a little bit of cleanup trimming. And so I'm just going to take these scissors and I'm just going to trim ever so gently. It's easy to take a big chunk when you're trimming felt, so just take it easy and just do a little bit of a trim at an angle, and now you're ready to go that way. Now, if you didn't feel like sewing this, guess what? You don't have to. You could technically, if you really wanted to, you could hot glue all of these pieces together and never sew this entire ornament if you really didn't want to, especially because it's not going to get washed. So you could use liquid stitch, you could use Aleene's tacky glue, or you could even use a hot glue gun if you wanted to. But I wanted to sew mine, and so that's what this one is. If you notice, I stitched mine with a blanket stitch all the way around because I wanted to stitch mine. But if you wanted it to stay dimensional like this, you could even use a double layer of felt. You could even trap a little piece of yarn. Let me show you what I mean by that. If you wanted to, you could stick a little piece of yarn underneath the felt and bury him underneath there, and then make him really chunky so that when you stitch that down, that would be dimensional as you stitched. And so you could actually bury some of that yarn in there and hand sew it all the way around if you wanted to. Okay? So this is how you cut out your pieces. You're going to need 2 pieces, one for the front and one for the back. And then you're going to start sewing. First you sew the swirl on top of the red, and then you sew the red on top of the tan, and then when you're done sewing both of these, one on top of the other, then you're going to attach it to its partner on the other side, and then you're going to sew all the way around to join the 2 pieces together. So far, do you guys have any questions? So this is how you would cut out all of your pieces, right? So this is how you cut and get that ready. Now for getting it ready to sew. In order to sew this either by machine or by hand, you're going to need to either pin it, staple it, glue it, or baste it. And so those are all different methods. Pinning it is simply attaching these little pins and putting it in place like this. That's one way of doing it. I tend to not use this method because your needle and thread will snag, and it kind of curls my project, and I don't like it when it curls it up. And so what I do, if I'm just going to hand sew it, I can simply baste it with a needle and thread. And so that way it'll stay out of my way. You can use dissolving thread, or you can use regular thread. I just have an entire box here. And you can sew this with metallic thread, just like that. So they have this DMC metallic, which is like a metallic embroidery floss. They sell spools of metallic thread, which tends to be a little bit more stiff. But you could certainly use any kind of metallic threads that you wanted for this project. You could even use metallic embroidery floss, which is probably what I'm going to do, just because I think it'll look pretty to sew that with a little bit of metallic embroidery floss. All right. So in order to hold this down, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a tiny bit of washable school glue, and I'm going to baste mine with a little bit of washable school glue, and I'm just going to take some on the back, and I'm going to brush it on there with this little ballpoint. It's called a bodkin, and I'm just going to put a little bit of that all over, and what that will do is that will hold it in place. I'm not doing it on the edges. I'm only doing it towards the middle because I don't want it to get anywhere near where I'm going to be stitching. So I'm just going to put a couple of dabs of this glue in the center, not a lot. You notice just little dabs of it. And I'm going to just use this little ballpoint bodkin. It'll stick to your fingers if you're not careful. So you can hold it with something else. This is a pimple popper. You guys saw that earlier. And you just rub that on there, roll it, roll it. And then once I have a little bit of that washable school glue, it doesn't turn yellow, then I can just lay it right on top, starting on the edge. And I'm ready to go. Make sure it's centered. And then I'm going to press it down with my hand. If you have a little roller, you can roll it. If you have something in your sewing room, like this big fat spool of thread, and that will hold it in place. And you can prepare several of those ahead of time and then just leave it just like that. There you go. I try not to use basting spray or 404 spray because it gums up my needles. So I just use the most minimal amount of adhesive possible so that I don't waste anything. All right, so once you have that, right, you can just set your bodkin aside. The glue will dry, and look, then it just simply rubs off of your fingers so it doesn't leave a mess. All right. So I have a couple of choices, right? I could run a basting stitch down here to secure it, but I don't need to because I have enough glue. But the next thing that I'm going to do now is I'm going to pick some thread, and I can pick a variety of metallic threads, and I have to decide on a stitch, right? Do I want a skinny stitch? Do I want a heavy stitch? And I think that I want to have this metallic embroidery floss, and this is number E415, and it's a nice thick metallic thread, and I'm going to use this to create a blanket stitch, right? So let me show you what a blanket stitch looks like. And you guys saw that earlier, right? The image that had the blanket stitch. Here you go. I need my glasses for this one because this one has a lot of strands. Does anybody have any questions so far? Hi, everybody. Let me see who's here. We have Linda. We have Angie. I'm going to take this now. I'm going to twist it. I'm going to shove it through that big fat needle threader because I need some help. I'm going to use all of these strands. Because I want a nice thick line of metallic thread showing. Okay. I tell you what, needle threaders are a lifesaver when it comes to giant embroidery floss. So here it goes. You're going to want to work with a piece that's maybe about 15 inches long, and this is 6 strands of metallic embroidery floss, because I'm going to come in and do my blanket stitch. So let me get all this other junk out of my way so it doesn't cause me any more issues, okay? So a blanket stitch, what a blanket stitch looks like is we always start at the bottom to the inside. And let me show you what that means. I'm going to start by, first of all, making a small knot, like a quilter's knot. And I'm going to start on the inside. So I'm going to go on the inside of this, and I'm going to show you at the bottom. So first you're going to come in from the inside of wherever you're stitching. That's the first step, right? So step 1. I'm going to pull that through. And I may leave a longer tail because I'm going to want to cut that knot off because I don't want it to leave a big giant lump on the back of mine. So I'm going to leave a little bit of a tail, and I'm going to come back and I'm going to trim that off later. And so then the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to make a straight line. Just like that. And that's my first one. And so then I'm going to start coming back in here. And how a blanket stitch works is I'm going to come back through here on this side, and I'm going to anchor that very carefully. And I'm going to come back around just like this. I'm going to loop inside there so that it ties it in and it won't come undone. So that's the main thing. So I'm creating a little start. And then the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to come in from the bottom like this. And I'm going to come in about 1/4 of the way or 1/3 of the way in, like 1/4 of an inch, just like you would if you were quilting. And I'm going to come in about 1/4 of an inch over. And I'm going to come this way. And I'm building like a little ladder, right? Because I want to anchor those and show my stitching. But when you're sewing with felt, you're not going to be able to pull it tight because it'll shrink too much. So once I have that, and I'm going to get this started, I'm going to come back over. And I'm going to come along that edge. This is a lot of floss, friends. Don't do as I do. This is a lot of floss here. And I'm going to come back over this way because I'm trying to anchor that piece. You see that? I'm trying to create an anchor and a starting piece. I'm going to come back over here. And I've created the beginning of my stitch. And come up here and come underneath and in between. And now I can do, I'm grabbing that bottom right there because I'm going to want to break that little thing off. And now I can do my traditional blanket stitch, which you grab one right here on your finger. You come in from the inside and you come out from the top like this and you loop it through. So all that rigmarole at the beginning was just me trying to get that bit anchored. And so now I'm just going to do the traditional blanket stitch, which goes like this, right? And this will tend to curl on you, so you really have to kind of watch what you're doing. And you can't pull too tight, friends, because if you do, you sink your stitches in way too deep. And so I'm just going to come around and do little stitches like this. Each time looping it around, oops, not on my wedding ring, and pulling it like this. So I'm building that stitch that's going to lay on this side and show up on this side. And that's a great big giant blanket stitch. So I come down here about 1/4 inch over, keeping this as a big giant loop, pushing that needle through there to the back, letting the thread fall behind the needle and pushing it up. See, like that, you make like a big circle every time. And this is tricky when you're working with metallic thread because the metallic thread wants to curl up on you, it wants to slide back. And so what I do is I just hold it with my finger and I pull a little bit but not too much. And it starts to make that kind of loop-de-loop little blanket stitch. Do you see that? Again, I pull it with my thumb out of my way, hold it like a kind of like a crochet needle. I come behind it, I grab a little bit of that red background and come up. Can you guys see my fingers? And we're going to do this all the way around, right? Like this. If you're not a fan of handwork, you can always do this on your sewing machine. So if you wanted to, and I did one earlier just to see which one I liked better, you could do one on your sewing machine. And so I did the same thing. My sewing machine has a little blanket stitch, and I was able to stitch a little tiny blanket stitch all the way around. Now it wanted to shift on me a little bit on my sewing machine. So if I were to do this again on a sewing machine, I would use 100% wool, and I would probably fuse this down before I did it on my sewing machine. But this is how you do it by hand. You just get it started, and then you take and you pull all the way around that little blanket stitch. Now if I didn't want to use this big giant blanket stitch, I could always do the same thing in white, or I could run a tiny running stitch along both of those edges in white and make it nearly invisible. And when you see, if you will Google penny rugs or woolly rugs, you're going to see that some people choose to do their wool applique with matching thread, and they use these little teeny tiny blanket stitches that go all the way around that you can barely see. And so if you want to choose to do it that way, you could do it that way as well. I just think that the little metallic gives it a little bit of a pizzazz, and I like how that looks. And I think it looks cuter in person than it does on this computer screen. But sometimes these big fat needles will get stuck, especially if you're doing this metallic thread, because it is very hard to work with. So I like making things hard on myself. Anybody else like making things hard on themselves? I was like, oh, this is going to be a challenge. Even better. Right? If it starts to get away from you like it did me because I was pulling on it, you could always add a tiny bit more glue and allow it to dry. Like I said, you could always take your stapler and staple these down and then just pull the staples when you're done. If that's not enough glue, you can take a tiny bit more of this glue and just push it down. But less is more when it comes to glues. But this dries perfectly clear, and then you're not going to have any problems with it. Okay? So just your swirly twirly frosting. Does anybody have any questions about a basic blanket stitch? Like I said, a basic blanket stitch is literally you come in from this side, you tunnel underneath, you come through. A lot of people will wrap it around the needle like this, but it's kind of like crocheting with your sewing machine needle, your sewing needle here. And then you pull it. This is a great stitch for applique if you want to do cute little applique, but look at how cute that looks. See it? I like that metallic thread. And so I'm just going to do this all the way around. All right, friends, it is 9:30. I'm going to continue working on this little hand one. And tomorrow, when we get together, I'm going to show you the finished ornament, and I'm also going to show you the same ornament, and I'm going to show you how to make it in fabric. So you have a pattern for tomorrow. So tomorrow's project that I'm going to be working on is the star, and I'm going to show you a different technique, and I'm going to show you how to make the star tomorrow on December 5th. My needle is sticking because it's very, very thick, super thick. See all the strands of thread that I'm using? It's literally, what is this? 6 strands of metallic thread, which is very stiff. And so it has a hard time getting through that felt. That's one of the reasons why it's sticking. And if I waxed this, it would probably go a lot easier. So waxing the thread will sometimes help, especially if you're working with this super wiry metallic. So it makes it very hard. It would be easier if I just stabbed it downward like this, because it's the big eye of the needle pushing all the way through all those layers. And then I hold it with my finger and I bring it back. It sticks less this way. But then my stitches are less even. So yeah, the eye of that needle is quite big in order to accommodate this much embroidery floss. So you do have to kind of wrestle with it, but it makes a really nice stitch. And then you just have to make sure that you're not stretching it, because felt will stretch and get distorted. So you have to kind of be careful not to abuse it too much. But metallic thread is a little bit of a bear, but I think it's worth it. Like I said, this is a DMC metallic thread that I love using. And I like using it's called DMC Diamant, but it's literally made with metal. And so you can see that it's not normal thread. See, you can feel that it's a very thick, stiff thread. They have this DMC that comes in a skein is also the same way, but it's ultra thick. So this is like medium, this is ultra thick, and then they always sell this ultra thin metallic in a spool. So you decide what kind of thread you want. You can hand sew it, you can machine sew it, it's up to you. And if you don't feel like doing either one of those, guess what? You could always glue this if you wanted to, and then just put a little bit of the metallic puffy paint if you wanted to do this with the grandkids and you didn't trust them with needles. My granddaughter Ella, she's dangerous with needles and scissors. She likes to cut her hair. And she's done that a couple of times in my sewing room. So I got to keep her off of my sewing needles. And it gets easier as you go. There you go. See it? The thread can get twisted. So if you notice that you're having a hard time like I was, just come through and untwist your threads every so often. And pull them back, because it's like wrestling a bear. Just untangle that. And then you should just be ready to continue making this really cute little blanket stitch. And like I said, I like this stitch, doing it by hand, because it keeps the dimensionality of the applique. This one ended up being very flat. I like how this one is turning out by hand. And so I'm going to keep working on this guy tonight. And so tomorrow when you show up, tomorrow again at 8 o'clock Eastern time, I'm going to be finishing this up so you can see what it looks like when I put two ends together. And I'm also going to show you how to make this same one out of fabric. So I'm going to show you my fabric one. So if you are ready, go ahead and download this from the website. I'm just going to do a short and quick each night and show you a different step, and then you're going to watch all of these little ornaments come to life. I will see you guys tomorrow night at 8 p.m. Eastern time. If you miss any of our lives, I post them on the YouTube channel, so you can always go back and grab them. And the pattern is on the website, www.jellyrollclub.com, and it's called the Gingerbread Project. All right, friends, if you have questions, please drop them in the comments. Let me know what's going on. Tell me what your favorite cookie is. Put that in the comments. I don't know, you might even get a cookie recipe or two on the website, because this is going to be a lot of fun. I can't wait to see you guys tomorrow. Thank you for coming. Yeah, I don't know what it is about kids and cutting their hair. So I have to watch all my scissors. My granddaughter's not allowed to be anywhere near a pair of scissors. All right, friends, it was great for you to stop by. Please just tell me where you're from. Tell me what you're interested in. I accept all kinds of feedback. Constructive feedback is super, but if you have suggestions for a project, let me know. Guess what? Your project might show up. You just never know. All right, friends, that's all for now. I will see you guys tomorrow night at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Have a wonderful night and have a great start to your week, friends. Bye-bye.